Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Almost hidden in the top left-hand corner of this painting, the artist Paul Gauguin has written in French these three questions. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Like many other people, I have puzzled over the nature of human existence for a long time, and my work as a documentary filmmaker has given me opportunities to consider these great mysteries from many different angles. And I've found increasingly that some of the most helpful and challenging contributions to my quest have come from the work of the Austrian philosopher and educationalist Rudolf Steiner. This film is about Steiner's life and about the work that his ideas and insights have inspired in all areas of human life. Ideas that challenge us to ponder on the true nature of the human being. In Gauguin's words, what are we? Steiner would probably add, and what might we become?
Rudolf Steiner challenges us to be more conscious. More conscious, and also, I think, to ground our consciousness in the warmth of heart. And I feel one of the most important things about Steiner is actually that he encourages us to bring thinking and feeling together, so head and heart together.
I think Rudolf Steiner was a realist and a very practical person. I think he saw that he was planting seeds for the future.
For me, meeting the work of Rudolf Steiner was like finding water in the desert, because I had searched and searched through many different spiritual paths, very much in the East and also in the West, including the spiritual path of modern science.
I can't think of anybody else who simultaneously follows the whole philosophical and scientific tradition within the West and within modernity, studies it carefully, it becomes very competent in its different disciplines, and at the same time is clearly a mystic.
In one place, Rudolf Steiner said, if you would like to access higher wisdom, you have to unlearn everything that you have accumulated thus far. And to those of us with degrees and credentials and so on, it's a humbling moment. This notion of unlearning the conventional knowledge that is around us and being open in a kind of vulnerable place to a different way of seeing.
Rudolf Steiner was ahead of his time during his time, and he's actually ahead of his time even in this time. Now, he's been dead for almost 100 years.
After a little time, I'll have half Q if R is equal.
I think one of the greatest challenges that Rudolf Steiner poses to us today is a challenge that he lived with in his own life, namely the challenge to battle against sectarianism.
Yes, he felt sorry because he wanted to help people, but he wanted more than this. He wanted to let them free. So that's the essential point. It's the freedom. And you can help people and give them your own treasure, but finally they live out from your treasure and they are dependent. And that's the last thing Steiner wanted to have, dependent people.
I think the challenge for me is to individualize what he has given. As he was in Norway, he almost always in his talks said, "Don't believe what I'm saying, You have to try it in life. Try it in life. And for me, that's my inner direction. I have to try it out and not just take it for granted it is like this. And then life becomes so exciting.
I think really Steiner is about love. But it's hard to get to that realization because of so many thoughts. So many thoughts. But when I think of him, I don't always think of the thoughts, though I'm impressed by them, of course. I think much more of this man, traveling on drafty trains in the middle of the night to go to the next city to meet with, 9 people who are trying to figure something out, or people just scratching at him constantly for help. So he was a servant. So he wasn't a privileged person, he was a servant. So I think it's about love, really.
Rudolf Steiner's influence, particularly through his indications about education, agriculture and medicine, is increasingly apparent. There are 7 Rudolf Steiner Waldorf schools in India and over 1,000 worldwide, plus communities for those with learning difficulties, as well as hundreds of farmers working with his suggestions of how to not only produce healthier food, but also how to heal the earth in the process. Waldorf schools, biodynamic agriculture, Velida, Demeter, Hauschka, Camp Hill, these names are increasingly familiar all over the world. In South India, I visited a group of small-scale farmers learning about the influence not just of the sun and the moon on plant growth and health, but also of the planets, a reminder of what in many parts of the world is still not totally forgotten. Rudolf Steiner shared this knowledge, in part based on traditional wisdom, in a course of lectures to farmers in Central Europe in 1924, a year before he died. An awareness of the influence of the planetary constellations, and including when you sow what, is also central to biodynamic agriculture, a worldwide movement informed and inspired by that course of lectures, delivered at a time when farmers were already expressing concern about the effect that chemical fertilizers were having on the soil and on the health and quality of their produce.
The beauty of Dr. Rudolf Steiner is that he was not just a philosopher living in a world of ideas and just philosophizing and just thinking. He brought all these ideas to practical human activity, whether it's agriculture, education, medicine, architecture.
Jakes is president of the Biodynamic Association in India and has his own farm, but spends more and more of his time in China and Taiwan, as well as in India, helping small family farms to improve the quality of their land and crops and to survive financially in a culture that has increasingly encouraged farmers to use expensive pesticides and high-yielding, chemically dependent seeds. These seeds have to be purchased each year, bringing an end to the practice of farmers producing their own. Dependency on the multinationals has forced a huge number of Indian farmers into bankruptcy, and many even to suicide. Jakes went on to tell me how many of Steiner's philosophical and spiritual teachings, as well as their practical applications, felt very familiar to people in India, in particular the belief in reincarnation and karma. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Despite the many challenges and seeming setbacks that we may face, the idea that we live and learn and grow through many lifetimes is an ancient teaching. So too, that the universe is alive and has purpose and meaning. This awareness that there is more to reality than meets the eye was simply and imaginatively expressed to me 5,000 miles away from South India, through an encounter at a biodynamic farm in England, on the edge of the Ashdown Forest in Sussex.
There's nothing nasty goes on these raspberries then, yeah?
Nothing at all.
The only thing that we put on these raspberries are two preparations, something called 500 and 501. 500 is the horn manure preparation and 501 is the silica preparation. And they're sprayed at the beginning of the season and then when there's fruit coming.
Is the whole thing about the sort of planets and raspberries, I mean, that obviously makes sense to you, does it?
Does it make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. But bringing in the forces of the whole of the cosmos and the whole of the universe absolutely makes sense. I don't understand the minutiae of it and I don't need to understand. But what I need to really know and believe is that I'm not alone in this garden working to grow all this. And that's for me is what's important.
Liz is in charge of the fruit and vegetables at Plawhatch Farm. Her sense that she's not alone echoes Steiner's many references to an invisible realm that supports and sustains not only the life of plants and animals, but humanity itself. What was very visible at Plawhatch Farm on the day we filmed was a group of 9-year-olds from the Steiner Waldorf School in Brighton. Farming is one of the subjects on the curriculum for Class 3 in all Steiner schools. During my visit to what was clearly a thriving and truly mixed farm enterprise, someone remarked that Old MacDonald seems to have got it right.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a dog, E-I-E-I-O, with a quack quack here and a quack quack there, here a quack, there a quack, everywhere a quack quack. Old MacDonald had a farm.
Class 1 at the South Devon Rudolf Steiner School. Only now, aged 6 to 7, are the children starting formally to learn to read and write. And like much of the teaching in Steiner schools, music and art are incorporated into the lessons throughout childhood.
Here a bar, there a bar, everywhere a bar.
The South Devon School is one of 35 Steiner Waldorf schools in Britain. The first Waldorf school was founded by Steiner in 1919 at the request of Emil Molt, owner of the Waldorf cigarette factory in Stuttgart, who wanted an education for the children of his employees that prepared them for life in its fullest sense. And life in its fullest sense means educating hands and heart as well as head. Until the children go into Class 1 around the age of 7, the emphasis is on play, imitation and on rhythm. Baking on Monday, painting on Wednesday, an expedition on Thursday and so on. And on stories which are told rather than read by the teacher. And Steiner's picture of child development is not only of children growing up and thereby learning the ways of the world, but also of children growing down, bringing into life their own unique biographies, as he saw it from many lifetimes. And this needs time to build a strong and firm foundation so that each child can not only then face the world as it is, but also develop the strength of character to maybe change it. Songs and ring games are another important ingredient in the early years. Ideally, dexterity in their bodies will gradually translate into dexterity in how they think and create. Much of what the children do, not just in the kindergarten, is designed to counteract what is increasingly recognized in the modern world as an erosion of childhood. A concern that extends far beyond the Waldorf school movement. As at the Brighton Steiner School, these 9-year-olds are also not just studying farming, but actually doing it as part of what is called main lesson. one particular subject taught for the first 2 hours every morning over a period of 3 or 4 weeks. Around this age, most children start to take a new interest in the world around them, whilst also experiencing a certain separation from that world. Now they begin to study science, and in mathematics the concept of fractions.
Still waiting for science. Now, who remembers which are those potatoes from the ones we planted? Are they early? Only early? Lily? First early, thank you. What else have we got here?
Main crop.
Main crop? Yeah, what else? Lily, me.
Early the second.
Phrase that differently?
Second early.
Thank you. Who can show me blight in this potato? Lily, show something to me. Can you see? I can see from where I am. Quite right. Yeah? Every digger should have 2 other ones working together. So should be groups of 3. A digger and 2 collecting the potatoes. The plants should all be brought back here, please. Yeah, girls? That's perfect. No, that's fine. So one on this side. You are too many here.
Well, they really seem to be enjoying themselves. I thought children weren't meant to like gardening.
They like gardening very much because they can see the end result. So they've been involved in the ploughing of this field, well, spreading the muck, the ploughing of the field, which was done by horses. So they actually pulled the plough. So they had, what is that?
When can we see the lamb?
Soon. Yeah?
Oh, that's a big one.
How many?
7.
Very gentle.
9.
Whoa, wow, look at that.
14. 16.
They respond very well to the activities we propose. It's the practical ones there. Yes, let's do it. And there's a real enthusiasm that comes from them.
Where are you from?
I'm from Brazil. I'm from Brazil, yeah.
So there are Waldorf schools in Brazil too?
There are Waldorf schools in Brazil,
Yeah.
but I wasn't connected to schools there. I was connected to the biodynamic impulse, but not to schools.
Yeah, you're doing both.
That's right, yeah, sort of bringing them together, really. Yeah.
Hey, pass it up. What's that?
Andre is also helping this class to build a stall from which they can sell the vegetables. Building is another subject taught at this age: planning, measuring and execution.
Let's make a pile over there, okay? Down there.
The curriculum in Steiner schools is designed to introduce subjects when they resonate and correspond to where the child is at in his or her development. Insight into what you teach when, and a recognition of distinct 7-year phases in child development were 2 of Steiner's special contributions to education.
What is this, Declan?
That's to support, that's to attach the 2 poles together to make them both steady.
Yeah, and what else? Jude?
Also, so when we put the roof on, you don't have to put it exactly on the top of the pole, we can put it on the side bit.
Yeah.
Does it hold up the roof?
Well, it will. Like Jude said, what will be sitting here?
But not all teaching in Steiner schools takes place outdoors. Biology is the main lesson subject for Class 6 for the next 3 weeks. From Class 1 to 8, the children who are unstreamed have the same teacher for these main lesson subjects, whether it be science, history, mathematics or geography. These key subjects form the core of the Waldorf curriculum.
How does the queen ant start to establish her colony after she's mated with the drone on her nuptial flight? Aggie?
She digs a hole and then carries all the earth out of the hole so she can have more space to dig.
Excellent, thank you.
Alexa Smith will stay with this group of children until they go into the upper school around the age of 15. This can mean the children having the same class teacher for 8 years ideally creating a bond between teacher and pupils that goes way beyond the actual knowledge imparted. For the rest of the school day, the children will be taught by specialist teachers, languages, games, crafts, etc. I asked the teacher of Class 2 what attracted parents to their school.
Well, I think there are an awful lot of parents who come to our schools and sense that what's there is wholesome and good for the children, and they're looking for, you know, childhood with all the light and joy that childhood brings, and quite often seeing in many schools that children in a way trying to be moulded into something which isn't child-friendly, and they see that in our schools, you know, we celebrate childhood and we try to bring things which actually really nurture and nourish and feed where the children are actually at. And so they'll see that, they'll sense that, and then they bring their children. And I think it's up to us to make what we do available and understandable in terms which don't make people feel that it's something weird that's behind it. Because I firmly believe it is not something weird. The sun with loving light makes bright for me each day. The soul with spirit power gives strength unto my limbs. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it really does nurture and nourish those children, and they are free afterwards. They're not coming out having to believe in any particular belief system or anything. They're totally free, but they've been nourished as human beings.
Ian Powell teaches art and the history of art as well as drama to the upper school. Although there tend to be no internal exams in Steiner Waldorf schools, the pupils do take state examinations. I asked Ian about the word results, a label that is increasingly associated with a school's performance and success.
For me, there's no such thing. One of the frustrations, if you think about that as a frustration, is that I will never see the results of my work until they come back to me when they're at least over 35 or 42. And that's from a strong belief that they are continually growing. I mean, to think that a young person is only a summation of the results of, if it's GCSEs or A-levels or even a degree, if that's all that the person is, that really is a very slight on the individual, because we all know that, in fact, you're still developing. So I'm really well aware that anything I do here, if it's an examinable, is purely to allow them to go on to the next phase of study. It has nothing to do with a result.
No, again, time. Victor! How'd you come about? Bobby! Oh.
I then asked Ian how he related, as a teacher, to what Steiner said and wrote about karma and reincarnation.
I think subliminally, as a teacher, when you've been working long enough, I think what starts to happen is you realise there's more to this young person than just the face value that you're seeing or the what can become. There's something that they're bringing with them. Yes, there's hereditary, that's true too. There's the family, there's their society, but there's something else, and you become aware of the something else very often. One doesn't look at it or dwell on it or try to research it because it's not within our remit to do so, but you're certainly aware that there's another tool, there's another something there that's happening that needs resolution or needs to be resolved, or that you allow the young person to perceive through doing the activities that we do. They don't see it as karma, of course, but maybe when they're 35, 42, something might happen in their lives that they think, I was dealing with something that I had to work out at that age, even though I didn't know it.
The school's doctor is James Dyson. In addition to his orthodox medical qualifications, he has made an in-depth study of Steiner's medically related lectures and writings, and of the considerable research that these insights have inspired into a greater understanding of the human being. In Gauguin's words, what are we? I asked James how these other perspectives informed his work as a doctor.
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, just looking out of the window just now, what I was particularly interested in was observing movement, how children move.
And I think that's as good a place to start as any, because movement speaks the language, not just in the ordinary neurological sense, but movement and gesture speak the language of the soul, they speak the language of development, they show us how a child is relating to the environment, for instance. And nowadays particularly, harmonious movement is often the exception rather than the rule.
And why is this happening?
I think that young children nowadays are subject to a far higher level of sensory stimulation than they were in the past, from a much earlier age, be it in the form of IT and screens, or in other ways too. And at the same time, children are deprived of the kind of traditional possibilities of movement through which, your average child was exposed 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Waldorf schools are almost unique in not introducing computers until the upper school, and then only gradually. Many parents and educationalists these days share their view that early childhood should be less focused on information technology and generally less pressured.
The key theme of what Steiner brought as a picture for child development, namely that up until neurological maturity has reached a certain level, in the 6th, 7th year of life, you should not tax the nervous system cognitively, but you should work very much with the faculty of imitation and creative play and stimulate that.
And for what reason? Why shouldn't you tax the brain? I mean, that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
I think the simplest way of putting it is that if you're still laying the tracks for the tram line, you don't drive the tram along.
The network of people interested in Steiner's ideas is worldwide and growing. Here in Hyderabad in South India, several hundred are gathering for a conference of the Asia-Pacific region of the Anthroposophical Society. Anthroposophy being the name Steiner chose for his movement after his break with the Theosophists. Most, if not all, of these people would reject the notion of a cult, in that as teachers, farmers, doctors and therapists, although interested and inspired by Steiner's insights, they are working hard to make these insights their own and to take them further, as well as to learn from important developments in education, science, medicine and psychology since Steiner's death nearly 100 years ago.
I'm originally from the UK. I met anthroposophy 34 years ago in a school for handicapped children near Reading. It's now a Waldorf school. At that time it was a special school. Some severely disadvantaged children there, and I worked as the gardener and my wife worked as the cook. And for me, meeting the work of Rudolf Steiner was like finding water in the desert. Most of my teaching in Waldorf education has been in Australia, and in the last few years of still teaching in Australia, in the 90s, I already started to come to Asia during my holidays and made contact with various very grassroots initiatives beginning the Waldorf schools. And little by little this grew, and now I work full-time, really, and particularly now in China and Taiwan.
What is the response then to Steiner in that part of the world?
It's exploding. It's phenomenal what is happening in China at the moment. I would say the people who come to the training courses and seminars and the initiatives that have started in China, those people, I would say, are hungry. They're really hungry to find meaning in their lives. They're hungry to connect with the outside world. And they're deeply grateful. That is my experience, and this is what gives me energy.
The mainstream education in China is very, very tough, very, very competitive, and You know, the children, they are forced to study from very young, from kindergarten back to 3 years old. And more parents realize this is not what they want. And actually, you know, like the Waldorf schools and kindergartens, most initiatives are parents.
While in Hyderabad, I visited one of India's 7 Steiner Waldorf schools, 4 of which are in Hyderabad. Sloka was founded in 1997 and has nearly 400 pupils. Like all Waldorf schools, crafts, music and art are an important ingredient. But it is the morning 2-hour main lessons that are at the heart of the Waldorf curriculum.
So we would do a little bit of recall of what we have done last year in physics.
And from what they are taught in history, science, geography, etc., the pupils create their own textbooks.
This book is very beautiful.
This is excellent. This is about astronomy that is done in class 6. We begin with the sunset and we continue the observation till sunrise. This is the Earth and the position of man. In class 6, when we are doing the astronomy block, we ask the children to stay back in school for a night, and throughout the night they observe the sky. From the North Star we start our story. All the constellations are observed by the children throughout the night, and this is how it goes on till the sunrise. So the next day the child has to write about what he observed the previous night.
3 or 4 weeks are devoted to each main lesson subject, and the pupils will learn about that subject initially from their teacher and not from textbooks. They will then write up and illustrate the lesson themselves. And everything taught is aimed to correspond to where the children themselves are at in their own development.
Class 8 is a very difficult class where they just want to break all the rules and just be independent and be themselves. They do not want any teacher. They just need a very, very strong authority to control them. Here we do the revolutions in history. So that is the time when a revolution is happening within them also.
None of these pupils will have started formal learning, including reading and writing, until they enter class 1, around the age of 6 or 7. In India, as elsewhere in the world, what increasingly concerns many parents in particular is the stress their children experience, both in terms of the pressures of living in the modern world, but also the pressure of having to achieve, to score points, tick boxes, pass exams, all with the aim of eventually getting a good job. But, in the opinion of many people, coming far too early in their lives. At Sloka's kindergarten in Hyderabad, the emphasis is on a very simple and rhythmic routine of creative play and stories. Or simply having time to watch and wonder.
As little children, they cannot differentiate between play and work. For adults, we know that there's a play time and a work time, but children, play is as important because it's all imitation, that they imitate whatever they see. And actually, if they're like, I'm cutting fruit, they could be, cutting an imaginary fruit there, but they're actually doing it. It could look as play for us, but for them, it's real work. They're actually cutting fruit. Or perhaps they're actually cooking something. It is work for them. They cannot differentiate between work and play.
What Steiner emphasized when he founded the first Waldorf school in 1919 in Stuttgart was that childhood has distinct phases, and that children not only have to grow up and learn the ways of the world, but also need time and space so that what each one brings into the world can unfold harmoniously. Trailing clouds of glory is how Wordsworth expressed it, though some of the baggage we carry on our backs, maybe from past lives, is often far from glorious. Simple and unhurried. It is this atmosphere that is attracting more and more parents to Waldorf kindergartens all over the world. Here in upstate New York, in the Hawthorne Valley Waldorf School, I came across this growing awareness that if childhood is eroded, we are diminished as adults.
There's a story, I think it's from Zorba the Greek, about him holding a butterfly that's just come out of a cocoon and wanting to see it fly. So he tries to blow on the wings to dry the wings before their time, before they're really strengthened and ready. And the butterfly ends up crumbling and unable to really fly, and its time was not yet come for it. So we're giving children time.
I asked Janine whether she believed there'd been some golden age when all was peace and harmony.
No, I think every age has had its struggles, but I feel that, it's all a remembering and a forgetting, and we've done quite a bit of forgetting, and it's time to do some remembering again. That's really what I feel. And Steiner brought so much, but also many other humanitarians, Gandhi and Tolstoy and many great thinkers have brought these gifts. So wherever we go, if we can find ourselves centered again and being able to remember our true purpose of why we're here, in serving each other and in regenerating this gift of life.
The teachers who come forward to work in places like the Hawthorne Valley School, one of over 100 Waldorf schools in the USA, share what many other people feel these days, a view that education is not just about imparting knowledge, but is also about awakening and nurturing what the children already know.
Tell me about your...
Torrin Finzer is chair of the education department at nearby Antioch University in New England and general secretary of the Anthroposophical Society in America.
Which grade is she in now?
4th grade.
The great crime of our time is that in too many educational settings, the adult consciousness, the intellectual adult consciousness, is pressed on the young child in the name of performance, in the name of academic achievement. And that is a great crime to childhood, because what's happening there is you're denying the innate qualities that live in the child at that time.
As well as the Waldorf School in Hawthorne Valley, there's a 400-acre biodynamic farm, an active youth group called Think Outward, a bakery and shop, and a kitchen garden from which vegetables are trucked twice a week to Union Square Green Market in New York City. Coordinating this whole Hawthorne Valley operation, an attempt to tackle our day-to-day needs in a healthier and saner way, is Martin Ping.
There's a lot that doesn't seem to make too much sense anymore, and yet we've grown up with it. We've created it. Human beings have created the system we're in now. So there's something in that we are challenged by, because it's not like it was necessarily just imposed from outer space or something. We did this. So how do we find our way out of it? If we're beginning to see the cracks and we're beginning to feel like it's not meeting us at a very, very deep human level, then how do we find our way back out? I think Steiner really had a lot of very fine indications that provide a bit of a roadmap for that. And it's not just Steiner. I mean, there's obviously many, many ways in which people are approaching our modern predicament.
Where we walk to school each day, Indian children used to play, all about our native land, where the shops and houses stand. And the trees were very tall, and there were no streets at all, not a church, not a steeple, only woods and Indian people, only wigwams on the ground, and at night they're prowling round. What a different place today, where we live and work and play. Please have a seat.
Jack Petrush has been a Waldorf teacher for 30 years, and this is the 4th time he's taken a class through the 8 years until the children reach the age of 15.
Silent arithmetic. Here we go. Reverse the digits. Kneel. Excellent, good.
Nearly 2 hours later, and the morning main lesson is over. One of Jack's concerns is that in the Waldorf school movement, there isn't always sufficient interest and appreciation for some of the positive things being pioneered in mainstream education. On the other hand, mainstream appreciation of Waldorf methods is also not much in evidence. I asked him if any sort of dialogue is taking place.
I wish I could say that it was happening in a marked way, but it happens more in small ways. There are educators who are coming out of mainstream who can appreciate what Waldorf has to offer.
Good, listen carefully.
But unfortunately, they're few and far between. And in our climate in America, with No Child Left Behind, and the tremendous pressure on testing that came out of the Bush era and is continued, unfortunately, with President Obama, it's very hard for the ideas that are essential to Waldorf to resonate within the educational community. There's just too much pressure.
Oh, see, this one was not good.
The man who trained me to be a teacher, John Gardner, he taught us that discipline begins with self-discipline, and that it's our ability to take ourselves in hand that really will help us to guide children in the right way, to be worthy of all they give you, because children look up to you in the most remarkable way. They see us as better than we are. You know, they when they're young, they see us as individuals who hold knowledge.
I want you to just trim it off a little bit.
And wisdom and the ability to solve their problems.
Because if you have lots of sap,
and it's not that we ever can live up to that completely, but if I work on myself, then I feel at least I'm more worthy of the love and affection they give you. I think about the world that the children that we teach and raise will inherit, and how many problems will be in that world. And I think about the kind of thinking that's going to be needed to solve the complex, seemingly insolvable problems that we have in the world with the environment, with our cities, with our prisons, and even in America with our democracy. And I know that the problems aren't going to be solved easily. They're going to require a type of thinking that is new and innovative. And I believe Waldorf kids, and I'm not just saying this to sell Waldorf, but I believe the kind of thinking that's fostered in a Waldorf school allows children to think out of the box. I feel children are going to need to ask the questions that nobody's asking yet to help solve the world's problems.
I gave the last word to 3 of the older pupils at the Waldorf School in Washington, D.C.
I love the class size. I mean, you find that in every Waldorf school, the small classes. And I was in public school for 3 years, and that was very different. You had different classmates every year and different teachers every year. And I like having the same ones to kind of develop relationships with. Yeah. That's been fantastic. That's one of my favorite parts of the school. And I also love main lesson and how you get to make your own textbooks. You don't have to like use them. I like praise that wherever I go and people ask me. That's what comes to mind is the main lesson books for me.
Going back to the teachers, I feel really nurtured and supported with how much you get to know your teachers in such a deep level. And you feel like friends, but it's still a professional relationship.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, it's definitely just the student-teacher relationship that is really important, and it makes you want to learn more, and it makes you dedicated to your work, and it means a lot more than just work because they're not just teachers.
Later, I talked to a group of 18-year-olds at Michael Hall in Sussex, the first Waldorf school to be founded in Britain back in 1925. I asked them what they'd most appreciated about their education.
I think what I like most about Steiner education is that it prepares you for life, not for just exams.
Yeah.
And I think when you leave school, you're prepared for all aspects of life.
Yeah.
Not just prepared for an exam.
Yeah.
Not just crafts and arts, and it's not just academic. It's finding a balance about everything, and that's how we go out into the world. Is potentially we go out as balanced human beings to grow and to mature, and so on in later life. But that's what makes it so rich.
These books, they're called what, your main lesson books, aren't they? I know they're not necessarily your own, but did you find that helpful to do things that way? I mean, you didn't have textbooks, you created your own textbooks. Is that the idea? Yeah.
Yes. It really is a very interesting way of looking at things because you're learning on a group basis but very individually. I think that's a really good mix. I mean, I've really enjoyed it, and it's also a very nice thing. I mean, when we were sort of in younger classes, I remember it was always the first thing you did in the morning. I mean, you recall what you've done the day before, so you're obviously going through it, and then you move on to something new. And it was always quite a nice way to kind of start the day because it is quite a gentle form of learning, but it's still very effective.
Yeah. Main lessons are really one of the most inspired parts of Steiner education. One of the biggest problems we have at the moment is that at least the West seems to be descending into this state where everyone needs constant gratification of little bits all the time, so constantly consuming, be it fast food or something like the website Twitter. We can no longer be bothered to read anything longer than 100 characters. The thing about main lessons is because it's a long block of doing one thing, it really develops your ability to kind of absorb and actually immerse yourself in something rather than just needing it instantly in a bite-sized piece. You have time to digest it, I suppose.
Michael Hall, like nearly all Waldorf schools in Britain and America, is a private fee-paying school, thereby putting it out of the reach of most children, not at all what Steiner would have wished. In most of continental Europe, Waldorf schools receive government support. Now, in the UK, there are moves to change the situation. Government funding, so far without unacceptable strings attached, is coming the way of what used to be the Hereford Waldorf School, founded in 1983, and now, since 2008, the Steiner Academy, Hereford. One government stipulation was that the school had a principal. Traditionally, Waldorf schools are run collectively by a college of teachers. Here, the principal, Trevor Meffam, who's been connected to Waldorf education for 25 years, is supported by his deputy, Clarence Harvey, who came from mainstream secondary education in Liverpool. I asked Clarence what drew him to a Waldorf school.
That's a long story. I suppose essentially, I believe in what it's trying to do. That there's something missing. That's my experience. There's something missing in mainstream education. And I have been aware of Steiner education for many, many years through my professional training and experience and so on. And I suppose I recognize in it the possibility of something different emerging. So I was very drawn to helping that to happen.
What would be different then?
In a word?
Yes, you know.
In a word,
yeah.
In a word, what's different is that I think this education makes it central that we're dealing with the children and who they are and who they can be, rather than with external demands of society. External demands of society are important, but it has to start with who the children in their deep selves, who they are. So for me, that was an exciting and important thing to help support happen. Is it possible in schools, in publicly funded schools with all the accountability, to not lose sight of the children?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What would you say, Trevor, the essence then?
Well, I think there's an awful lot of talk in these times about technology, globalization, speed, variety, all of those things. And a lot of it is packaging. A lot of it is stuff that's on the surface. But I think, echoing what Clarence just said, I think there's a really important need not to bring about globalization of the world, but to bring about humanization of the world.
The Washington Carver School near Sacramento in California, one of nearly 5,000 charter schools throughout the USA, and, like the Steiner Academy Hereford, publicly funded and free to students, but independently operated. The head, Allegra Alessandri, is gradually introducing Waldorf methods into what was one of California's most persistently failing schools. A further 20 charter schools in California alone are likewise bringing some of Steiner's educational ideas to youngsters for whom fee-paying schools are out of the question. I asked Allegra how the pupils and their families have reacted to her initiatives.
Is there resistance, or do they respond?
Well, because we are a school of choice, students opt out of their large comprehensive high school to come here. So they're making a choice to be here. And mostly what we hear, the majority of the time, is, why didn't I find this sooner? We have students who are very creative and artistic, who have been really languishing in the system, who have been failing in the system, and yet are very bright students with enormous talents. And they come here and find a place to flourish because they are developing and growing, and that's recognized.
The compromises that inevitably arise when Waldorf methods are introduced into mainstream education are a problem for some Steiner purists. But it seems to me, on a visit to a school like this one, that Steiner would be delighted that people are experimenting and moving beyond the borders of a movement that can all too easily become inward-looking and even elitist. And perhaps most important of all, Allegra and her team are making an important contribution towards helping and encouraging less fortunate young people. I asked her what it was like when she first took over.
There was gang activity. We called the police 2-3 times a day. We had regular drug busts. We confiscated many, many ounces of marijuana over the school year. We had many fights that we were breaking up in classrooms, outside of classrooms. There were maybe 2 or 3 thefts a day.
Allegra used the word process to describe what is happening at her school. Not yet a full Waldorf curriculum in place, but they now have a choir, a garden, fruit trees have been planted, Waldorf-trained teachers are gradually joining her, and fighting is a much more skilled and disciplined affair.